Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Single Tracks Podcast. My name is Jeff, and today my guest is Matt Lyon. Matt founded Hydrapak in 2001 and currently serves as the brand's president and CEO. He's worked in the outdoor industry for decades and serves as the board chair of the California Outdoor Recreation Partnership. Thanks for joining us, Matt.
All right. Thank you. Glad to be here.
So tell us a bit about how Hydrapak got started. What was your first product and what was like the problem you were trying to solve with it?
Boy, we got it. So Hydrapak is 20 years old. We started in 2001.
Okay.
I had been in the kind of the sporting goods industry for a few years. I was working at Marin Mountain Bikes for 5 years prior to that, and had been involved with launches of high-tech snowshoes, and also some was in the footwear industry for a couple of years. So had a real chance to get around making products that people could use and could get direct feedback from.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always had a real affinity for sports, for being active. I've always been a cyclist, a hiker, a biker, other things to start. And so I actually left Marin Mountain Bikes in the summer of 2001 and started looking for something to do on my own. As an entrepreneur, I was ready to kind of do it on my own nickel, if you will say, take the risk on myself.
Yeah.
And it so happened that Bell Sports that summer was selling a few of its brands. And so I got in contact with the folks there in Santa Cruz and put in an offer. They also sold road gear that summer, a brand they had that was sold to Yakima and shut down shortly thereafter. And that was a story in itself. The two bidders for the Hydrapak brand were myself and Camelback. Camelback was owned by the same company as Yakima. So Yakima had just bought road gear and shut it down. And so the thought was that Camelback was going to do the same thing to Hydrapak. So that wasn't very popular with the employees at Bell Sports because they had invested a lot of time in both brands.
Yeah.
So the management decided to sell it to me instead of Camelback.
Wow.
And so that was that was my start. That was my opportunity. We agreed on the deal on September 10th, 2001. So I was
day before September 11th.
Day before 9/11.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was in my lawyer's office drafting up the documents and with the TV on the conference room table, kind of watching the Twin Towers fall. So it was.
Did you have second thoughts then? Were you like, oh no, this is going to be bad for business? Or
it all started hitting me the next day. The kind of what have I done? When I think it took a little while for that to sink in with everybody.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize how big of an impact it would have on me because I was very focused on just, my goal was to take a product line that was big enough or of a size that an entrepreneur could start with. I had been doing bikes and that was a little bit more formidable of a challenge. And I wanted an area where we could innovate and come up with something that was meaningful for the customers, but was also patentable from a business standpoint. And so I really like this category in that there's a little bit of technology involved in the water containment section, the reservoirs, whatnot, but there's also a lot of accessibility with the backpacks and the cut and sew side. So I was just really caught up in what I was doing, and I didn't realize until later how much 9/11 would affect business, and then also it in particular affected our category because of all the military purchasing in hydration packs. It was just a really kind of crazy time. But for me, I started off really focused on just really trying to create a better mousetrap. That I liked the technologies that had been developed. Started working with the factories in China, and myself, I'm a mechanical engineer, sitting down doing some development and thinking through the products, using the products, kind of starting to get out and go to and talk to consumers and go through, that was the launch for me of starting this whole process of innovation for improvement of the products for the athletes.
Hmm.
Um, now for the company, we talk about our mission being to help athletes reach peak performance. So
Mm.
that's how we call it today, but really it's the exact same thought that I had back then, which is
Yeah.
how can we make these things better and how can I make, a brand out of this and something that everybody will recognize that this is a better product.
Mm.
So that was quite a beginning.
Yeah. Well, so when you bought the company, was it just you, or did you have like sort of a team that you had in place and were going to bring along, or what was sort of your game plan?
It was just me. The team I had were all the sales reps that I knew.
Okay.
So I was able to call up a whole full national team of independent sales reps who knew me from Marin Mountain Bikes, and
Hmm.
who were willing to bring on the brand and introduce it to the shops. And then at Marin, I had made a number of shop contacts and relationships. So really, my and I knew some of the editors in the magazines. I knew
Hmm.
some of the big buyers. So I had a lot of contacts, but from a team standpoint, it was just me. So it was literally me in the garage on day one.
Oh, wow.
Um, and then, but the like I said, the factory relationship had already been established, and so I
Hmm.
started growing that from the beginning. And really, I added the first employee probably a month after I started, and have been growing since then.
Okay,
Um,
cool. Well, you mentioned that you have a mechanical engineering background, and one of the things I think maybe people don't appreciate is like how difficult it is to seal anything that has to do with water. Like putting water in a bag, there's a lot that can go wrong there. And I know, from my own experience, I've had so many packs that leak, and like, why is this leaking? And, half the time it's because I set the bag down on the valve and the thing leaked all over the place. Other times
mhm.
I didn't seal it right. I didn't, something that I did wrong, or maybe the pack broke. What is the hardest part of getting that pack to reliably seal? Like, what are the biggest challenges that you see as a mechanical engineer?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Sealing in water is deceptively, it seems simple, but it's quite difficult.
Yeah, plumbers are really well paid.
And even, and some of the challenges that we have is that it's one thing to take a solid or rigid container and try and trap
Mhm.
water inside of it. But when you're taking a flexible container, it's
Yeah.
even trickier because
Mm.
the container can move all over. And so where your water is and what kind of pressures you have, you can change.
Hmm.
And then in particular, with the kind of materials we use, they're stretchy.
Right.
And it's fantastic because if you fall down on your back, your reservoir doesn't just burst; it actually stretches out of the way,
Mm.
so that
Yeah.
the water stays inside. But that also can really change the amount of forces and pressures internally as it
Mm.
stretches and moves around.
Hmm.
So I figured out pretty quickly early on that I wasn't able to use a CAD model or any sort
Mm.
of drafting to figure out sealing. That there
Huh.
was a certain amount of it that just had to be make the products, produce them, go use them, and see how they perform.
Oh, wow.
And so
Interesting.
it ended up being, it made for a slower development process than I think
Hmm.
other products would be. You just couldn't draw it on paper and know that would work. You
Yeah.
really had to build it to see if it would work.
Huh.
Um, I think that was a real challenge, kind of dealing with that flexible side. The other is just and this will be true of any manufacturing process. There's many small components
Hmm.
involved in putting together a hydration reservoir,
Yeah.
and there's a certain amount of tolerance on every component.
Mm.
And the more you want to spend on the production, the tighter you can dial in the tolerance.
Hmm.
And for the higher volume, less expensive processes, usually the tolerances are a little looser.
Okay.
And you take any two tolerances that don't quite add up the same, or they're off in the wrong direction, and that you get a drop of water that will
Right.
leak. So it doesn't take, even though everything else is perfect, you can even just get little variations in the manufacturing process.
Yeah.
So um, it's just inherently a product that's pretty tricky from
Mm.
that standpoint. That
Yeah.
people like to see the products out there at a good price point, something they can afford. So you're very conscious of costs when you're going through, but also just this thought that failure is one drop getting out. And
Yeah. It's a pretty high
and so that's
standard.
yeah, it's a very high standard to have to meet. And so it's been very tricky.
Yeah.
But
Interesting.
I will say it's hydration packs in particular, you've got really two types of development going on there. You've got the cut and sew for the backpack, which is one
Hmm.
mentality.
Right.
And then you've got the plumbing,
Hmm.
which is containing the water, which is really a different kind of mentality and production process.
Yeah.
And so that's when I started off with both, but I figured out pretty early on that my expertise and sort of what I could really add value to in the long run was
Hmm.
around the plumbing and the
Okay. Yeah.
hydration and the sealing. And so that and kind of led me down the path of focusing on that.
Yeah. Right on. Well, you mentioned the other big name in the hydration pack space, and Hydrapak does things a little bit differently in that you provide the reservoirs for a lot of different pack brands. How has that model allowed you to grow the company?
So as I just mentioned it, that was something that we realized that making backpacks was different from making reservoirs, and there were
Mm.
different factories, different skills, different design packages. We were doing okay in the beginning, but really at that time, we were looking for a way to make a bigger impact, to get our product to more people. And so we started talking to the brands that were developing their own backpacks and that wanted to, had ideas in the area, but they really had no expertise in the hydration side of things.
Hmm.
And so that was a great opportunity for us. We stepped in and we started working with some brands early on. I think so. We started in 2001. It was about 2005 that we started up our first relationship with a backpack brand.
Hmm.
And for me, that was fantastic. We had a brand with their own built-in set of customers, their own what they were trying to do with their packs, and then
Hmm.
we could really focus on the hydration side.
Right.
And it gave us access to a whole new set of athletes and a whole new set of product designers to work with
Hmm.
to kind of hone our craft and to improve our product and to get feedback on it. And then as we went from one brand to another brand, we'd get another set of athletes and another set of
Mm.
product designers. And so I found that it was a great feedback loop for us to really improve our products, to really,
Yeah.
because these were very sophisticated customers and the product designers, and they were working with professional athletes who were using the products.
Mm.
So we really got some great exposure early on to having to make our product work, having to make it work well, having to make it reliable, kind of all
Yeah.
uh, the feedback was very immediate.
Was that tough to hear? Was some of that like, oh man, we need to up our game, or like, I don't know how we're going to solve this, or did you welcome it? Are you the kind of person that's like, bring it on? I really want to make this thing better.
The the great story. The first day I went to a trade show. It was actually outdoor retailer in Salt Lake City, and met with six different brands to pitch them on our reservoirs. And we
Hmm.
had a different approach, which is about using a slide top closure as opposed to a screw cap. And
Right.
at that time, everybody in the marketplace was using screw caps.
Hmm.
And so we were told many times that day that we could never be successful if we didn't have a screw cap. And so
Okay.
it was, that was quite discouraging. But in the same sense, I kind of, in talking to the people, I felt I understood what their job was and what
Hmm.
their desire was to make a better product and to bring innovation to the market and whatnot. And I walked away and said, okay, I understand this market. We can raise our game and be a great supplier here.
Mm. Yeah.
And so, so for me, it was not immediately encouraging, but I was encouraged just by like how much the people cared and how direct the feedback was.
Hmm.
And we really started, we started with a small handful, and then we grew over time. Um, Dakine was an early adopter for us that we worked with early on.
Hmm.
Then we moved, and then Solomon was a big name that we got involved with, and that was a great relationship because not only did they were they interested in the reservoirs, but we developed new products together, including the soft flask that gets used in running
Hmm.
vests.
Yeah.
That was something that was kind of just completely between our team, the Solomon development team, and their top runner, Killian Jornet, and some of
Hmm.
the products that he was looking for. And it spawned that whole uh, hydration vest concept
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
marketplace. And I really give credit to Solomon for putting the marketing and the sales effort to get that out there. I mean, they're a great marketing organization and really introduced that product widely.
Hmm.
So that's been a great relationship. And about 6 years ago, we got involved with Osprey backpacks and helped them launch into the bike channel with a different reservoir concept. And Osprey is now the top brand in the U.S.
Yeah.
For hydration packs. So overall, we work with, I think it's between 60 and 70 brands worldwide.
Wow.
So and it is about half of our business.
Hmm.
So it's been a very successful um, direction. It's also been challenging because when you're the hidden inside a backpack, people don't see exactly
Yeah.
what you're doing.
Yeah.
So from that standpoint, while we were literally making millions of products, we would still go to events and talk to people, and they wouldn't be aware of our
Hmm.
brand.
Right.
So it's been a very positive thing. I mean, I'm really happy that we took that direction and how it kind of shaped our company. And as you
Hmm.
mentioned, it's a different direction from what our competitors have gone through. Being
Yeah.
very, our competitors have been much more brand focused the entire time. So it's kept us kind of honed in and specialized on a certain
Hmm.
set of categories, certain set of needs. And I think that's one of the things that really distinguishes us today is that we are quite specialized. We still are hydration for athletes,
Right.
and that's what we do, and that's all we do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Well, one of the things that a lot of new users, especially of hydration packs, struggle with is how to clean their reservoirs. And like you said, you're the expert. This is what you guys do. You're the mechanical engineer. So I want to get your tips for cleaning and caring for a hydration reservoir. And I know one of your companies actually, Bottle Bright, is
Hmm.
a product that's designed for doing just that. But walk us through that. What are like your biggest tips for keeping your hydration reservoir clean and taste free?
Yeah. Well, I tell people, think of a reservoir just like anything in your kitchen.
Hmm.
When you're done using it, you clean it, you dry it, and you put it away.
Yeah, but not my Ziploc bags. I feel like this is a Ziploc bag situation. Although I will say my
Okay.
mother cleans Ziploc bags. She buys the gallon size, and
Right,
she
right.
uses soap and water, cleans them out, dries them and everything. So, but most people don't want to do that. So what's like the
Yeah.
easy solution?
Well, a lot of people have figured out if they use water, only water in their reservoirs, then they really
Hmm.
don't have to clean much.
Okay.
Then the trick is just to dry it.
Okay.
And so that's about, when you're finished riding, you want to empty out as much water as you can.
Hmm.
You want to open up the closure system, and try to keep the film from contacting each other so some air can circulate inside,
Okay.
and also so air can get to the base of the hose. So, like I said, really what happens is when the product doesn't dry,
Hmm.
that's when you start to get bacteria buildup and things start to seem a bit gunky.
Right.
And so the number one thing to think about is dry your reservoir. And so what
Mm.
are you going to do? You can hang it upside down and put something in so it drips empty. For a lot of the Hydrapak reservoirs, you can actually turn them inside out.
Yeah,
And
that's
once you
nice.
do that, the inside gets immediately exposed and dries within 15 minutes.
Mm.
For other systems, you just can figure out a way to kind of prop that the opening so that it stays open, doesn't close.
Hmm.
And then you want some way for the water to be able to drip out. So it's that again, kind of an advantage for me when I look at systems that are sealed on the end. Um, like we have the closure on the end because then the water just fully runs out.
Hmm.
When you have a screw cap that's on the side of a reservoir, it's a little trickier because if you hang it upside down, the water still pools in the bottom. So
Yeah.
you have to take a few more steps to figure out how to either take a paper towel and dry up that last bit of water in
Yes,
there, or
done that.
do something to get it to open up. So that would be what the first thing I'd say is just think about drying it.
Hmm.
The cleaning itself, if you do, even with water, you will start to get some stuff, residue built up over time.
Hmm.
Soap and water in a brush works great. Uh, a very small amount of bleach, like about 1 or
Hmm.
2% mixed with water and sloshed around, will also take care of things that grow.
Okay. Yeah.
Or so Bottle Bright was a great product. It was actually started by a couple of mountain bikers up in Vermont who were
Hmm.
trying to figure out how to clean their reservoirs. And one guy was a chemistry engineer, and he said, "Oh, there's got to be a way we can do this with all natural materials," because they
Hmm.
didn't want to use any detergents or synthetics.
Okay.
So they came up with a formula using all natural ingredients, nothing petroleum based. They figured out how to manufacture it in the U.S., all U.S. products, really, really solid thinking on their part. And they grew it to a certain point. They actually were on Shark Tank at one point.
Wow.
Every time they replay that Shark Tank episode, our numbers spike on our website. Um, but they got it to a certain size, and then they decided they both kind of wanted to go back to their day jobs,
Hmm.
and so they called me up and said, kind of told me the story. We actually had bought some from them just to for our warranty to send out for people who were looking for different ways to clean
Oh,
their reservoirs.
yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, I took a look at it. It is just a great little tablet. It's effervescent, so you don't have to scrub. It kind of does the
Hmm.
work itself. Again, all natural. And I thought that was really kind of in the keeping of what people were looking for nowadays.
Yeah.
And it's also something that you can use out in the field pretty easily. You can put it in, shake it around, and actually pour the water straight onto the ground.
Hmm.
That it's pH neutral afterwards, and it doesn't have any harmful chemicals. So we bought that line from the two guys about 4 years ago, um, and it's actually been just done fantastically.
Hmm.
That it's really found a user base, if you will. People like to use it. Yes, it works great for reservoirs. It also works fantastic on stainless steel cups and mugs.
Hmm.
So if you've got
Interesting.
a stainless steel bottle or cup and it's got some sort of coffee stains in it,
Hmm.
the kind you can't scrub out with a brush,
Yeah.
you drop one of these tablets in and it's just perfect after about
Oh,
an hour.
yeah.
So, and there's all sorts of before and after photos on the internet that people circulate on that. So, yeah, that's been a
Yeah.
great product. And it costs a little bit to buy a cleaner that's a single use cleaner,
Hmm.
but it does do a great job. So, if people are looking for kind of a surefire mechanism, Bottle Bright's a great solution.
Yeah. And one that doesn't really require a lot of elbow grease. Seems like it's a win. I remember years
Yeah.
ago testing a product. I don't think it's around anymore. Some guys invented like a dryer, basically an air dryer that you would
Mm,
like attach to
hmm
your reservoir and turn this thing on, and it would make a bunch of noise for hours and hours while it was supposedly drying your reservoir. But I don't think that
Yeah.
really took off. So a lot of riders, though, we all have our preferences. Some of us like a hydration pack or reservoir.
hmm
Others prefer bottles. So I'm curious, what do you pack when you go out for a ride? Do you bring a couple of polar bottles, which are made by your company, or Hydrapak? Do you get a reservoir? What's your preference?
So it definitely depends on the activity for me.
Hmm.
If I'm mountain biking, which we still do, I still have a Hydrapak backpack from the days we made those with the reservoir, and so I've just been always been a reservoir backpack guy for mountain biking.
Hmm.
Um, but to be honest, I am much more of a roadie than
Yeah.
a mountain biker. And so when I go out on the road, I'm using polar bottles
Mm.
in bottle cages, and I use our new Surge bottle, which is but sometimes insulated, sometimes single wall. Kind
Hmm.
of depends on how much water I'm looking to carry and how hot the day is.
Yeah.
Um, and then I do a fair amount of backpacking as well. I'm
Hmm.
kind of lucky living here in California. We've got some nice mountains not too far away, and I like to go up once or twice a year. And so I'm always using the reservoirs when I backpack as well.
Mm. Yeah.
So I'm able to use a fair amount of the products we make, which actually I enjoy. I enjoy.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's interesting you make that distinction between road biking and mountain biking too. I think a lot of people are the same way, where you go in for a road ride, you think of bottles, and you go for mountain biking, you go for a backpack. But
Hmm.
yeah, they're still both bikes. I'm a bottle guy myself, so whether
Okay,
it's mountain or road, I don't want anything on my back. So, but it's good to
got
have
it.
options. Makes sense.
And I see a lot of people using the waist packs now,
Hmm.
which seems to be quite a nice option, especially in the mountain community for folks that don't want something on their back, but they're just not able to carry enough water on their
Yeah.
frame.
Hmm.
It seems to be a good in between, and it's definitely one that's taken off.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I want to ask you about is what it takes to make an environmentally friendly product. A lot of the Hydrapak products and the Polar Bottle products are said to be environmentally friendly and use different recycled materials and things. I'm curious specifically to know how big of an impact that really has using recycled materials versus creating something that's going to last a really long time. Like if you could create a bottle
Mm.
or a reservoir that's going to last 5 years as opposed to being replaced every couple, is that as big of an impact as using recycled materials to make the product in the first place?
Well, it's a good question, and one that I don't think gets asked often enough. I think people, like this term sustainability and the
Hmm.
words recycled, and they get used by the marketing departments, and it almost turns into another feature to sell a product.
Right.
Whereas, reduce, reuse, recycle is much more complete thought about can we just reduce things or
Right.
reuse things rather than
Hmm.
just recycling. So, you know, we make all of our products out of plastic, and that's a problem long term if
Yeah.
people can't, come to a good feeling about using plastics.
Hmm.
Because there's definitely, kind of an anti-plastic sentiment, especially with single-use plastic bottles.
Right.
So we as a company, as a group, said we really need to address this head on and make sure that, we're really thinking about it and trying to stay at the forefront. Um, Having said that, our number one goal is always to help athletes and to
Hmm.
help athletes perform better.
Yeah.
So we don't want to sacrifice that performance or what we're delivering to the athletes because of sustainability.
Hmm.
Um, so the and so I it we've looked across all of our product range and looked and said, what can we do? First was what can we take and make out of recycled products or make them recyclable?
Hmm.
Um, so packaging was the number one. So trying to make all of our packaging to not use plastics that just get thrown away, but to use cardboard that can be curbside recycled.
Hmm.
We've looked at all of our taking away poly bags from as many products as possible. It's a little difficult. We have customers that demand poly bags.
Hmm.
So, we can't move away 100%, but we've moved towards wrapping in like tissue paper, things like that, instead of poly bags. We have one product, which is called the Recon. It's a Triton hard plastic bottle
Hmm.
for backpacking, and we use the Eastman 50% post-consumer recycled material that they have. It's called Eastman Renew,
Hmm.
and it's a fantastic product. It has all the clarity and the strength of a virgin plastic product,
Hmm.
but it's 50% post-consumer PET bottles that are mixed in.
Yeah.
So they're really at the forefront of recycling and being able to reuse these materials in a way that's they've literally taken that whole supply chain for the hard plastic bottles and are moving it towards 50% recycled.
Hmm.
just at all levels. So I think that's great to see. We were right on the front wave of that product. For something like our bike bottles or LDPE bottles, it's a little trickier. We have not been able to find a recycled content LDPE to use. We do what we call industrial recycling, where we take all of our rejects in the assembly process, or products that we have around the warehouse that we know are clean. We're able to cut them up, send them back to the supplier, regrind them, and use them to make new bottles.
Hmm.
But we can't do that with the post-consumer just because of the sanitary aspect.
Hmm.
So we're a little bit limited there. And for our flexible products, it's tricky. The TPU material is a very specific material. It has very specific FDA sanitary requirements, and so trying to get recycled materials in there has been tricky.
Hmm.
We are talking to a couple of our backpack customers that use TPU coated fabrics about trying to gather up all of our TPU and send it to their manufacturers to have it ground up and reused in new TPU coated fabric products.
Hmm.
A lot of those products happen to be black, just kind of like the black duffel bags that are made out of the coated fabrics.
Hmm.
So that works well for recycling. So we're kind of in the process of a lot of that right now. Um, that's part of the equation, though, is all the recycling. That's really about trying to keep things out of the landfill. Another way to keep things out of landfill is, as you said, is just to use things longer.
Hmm.
So we've started going to all of our events with a warranty chest. So we
Hmm.
basically bring replacement bite valves, replacement tubes, replacement sliders, all sorts of little things for fixing up your system.
Ah.
And we provide free warranty service at
Wow.
events. And so we send out kind of our social media posts beforehand saying, bring in your products, renew them, bring
Yeah.
them up to speed. And so we just kind of do that as a service so people can reuse the products. And then we've been fortunate with the Polar Bottle product, the way that it's produced. We print on a foil liner that gets trapped in between the inner and outer walls of the bottle.
Hmm.
And that means that your graphic doesn't get scraped off the outside of your bottle.
Right.
And so you see a lot of polar bottles that get used for years and years because they continue to look good after you've been using them.
Yeah.
So we started pushing a cap replacement program. So the thing that does wear out are the valves on the caps. If you put them
Hmm.
through the dishwasher a while, they age a little bit, they get stiffer, they don't seal quite right. And so you do need to replace your cap every year or two. But you can keep on reusing that bottle for many years. As long
Right.
as you like the graphic, you can keep on going. So
Yeah.
we've actually been encouraging that whole kind of cap replacement business
Yeah.
as something to help people prolong the life of their bottles. So we've definitely been embracing a lot of, so first of all, the recycled material, second of all, ways to lengthen the use of your product. And then the third thing we've done as a company is we've committed to being climate neutral. And
Hmm.
so last year we went through the full process of measuring our carbon footprint. We ended up going ahead and becoming climate neutral certified last year,
Oh,
which
wow.
meant that we determined the size of our carbon footprint and then we purchased offsets
Hmm.
to offset our entire carbon footprint as a company.
Wow.
So
Wow.
so they're all just steps, but like I said, it's I think it's more incumbent upon us as a company that works with plastics to make sure that we're doing everything we can to be
Hmm.
at the forefront and so let the athletes use the product that's best for them and feel good about it.
Yeah. And it sounds like you're finding ways along all those dimensions. Like you mentioned, the mantra is reduce, reuse, recycle. And so, I mean, reuse, number one, obviously you're selling reusable bottles, right? These are not like
Mm.
single
Hmm.
use. You're not running into the gas station and buying a bottle of water before your ride. Like you're reusing
Hmm.
the bottle every time you go out, and obviously incorporating recycled products and recycling your own products when you're able to. And then, yeah, reducing packaging. I mean, you have to do all of those things, and it sounds like you're able to address them all sort of in different ways and at different parts in the process. Well, we're going to take a break real quick, but when we come back, we're going to talk about U.S. manufacturing, investing in the bike industry, and the California Outdoor Recreation Partnership. Stay tuned. The next time you're shopping for mountain bike gear, check out singletracks.com/deals. Each week, we share our favorite product picks and exclusive coupon codes from our partners. You can also use the page to search for whatever you're buying, from complete mountain bikes to brake sets and tire sealant. That's singletracks.com/deals. And to get our weekly picks delivered to your inbox, be sure to sign up for our newsletter. Links to the newsletter and deals page are in the show notes. And we're back. So, Matt, aside from supply chain issues, has the current pandemic caused you to rethink your business in any significant ways?
Boy, who hasn't had to think about everything they've been doing for the last 18 months and
Right.
think about
Life.
whether they're doing it the right way or not?
Yeah.
Um, so supply chain has been very big. We've been blessed to have long-term partners on supply chain, both in
Mm-hmm.
Asia and in the US. So from that standpoint, we haven't been as impacted as many folks. We've just been able to strengthen those relationships. So I feel blessed on that front.
Mm-hmm.
We've definitely had to relook at marketing, how we reach out to the consumers,
Yeah.
um, and that I think we have worked a lot through the traditional channels. I would say, kind of working through our retailers, working through magazines, working through PR agencies, whatnot, and that kind of all stopped with the
Mm.
pandemic,
Yeah.
and we had to look at what was working, which was our direct digital outreach.
Mm.
We had just redone our websites to put a new message out there as of the beginning of 2020. So we were fortunate in that timing. And we were just starting to push on advertising on digital for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And it really, what we found was it was working. When we started getting the word out there, when we started taking our message and communicating it directly to consumers and
Mm-hmm.
thinking less about the channels that we were going through, we were getting great reaction just in engagement with folks and
Mm-hmm.
emails and whatnot, but then also sales on our website, sales through Amazon, and then sales through our retailers. So we're following our retailers as well, and then also feedback through our OE customers. So it was kind of a great win, if you will, that
Mm-hmm.
that's where everybody was looking, and we had a good message to get out there. And
Yeah.
I do believe in this concept of um, being focused, and I think that focused message was resonated.
Mm.
And so we literally just started committing more money every month to advertising and to communicating.
Mm-hmm.
And each time we did it, we found we were getting a positive return.
Mm.
And so we really are spending a lot more money communicating today than we did a
Yeah.
year and a half ago,
Mm.
directly to consumers and kind of getting the message and um, it's just, yes, it's advertising when you think about it, but it's so much more than advertising nowadays. We're talking about events. We just finished a fundraiser for the Marshall Fire Fund in
Mm-hmm.
Colorado, kind of touching base with all of our folks around that. It's really about kind of promoting a community.
Right.
And you know, Hydrapak's a small company. Not everyone's going to get super excited about being part of our community, but people like to see that they are associated with brands doing interesting things, and
Mm-hmm.
to touch base or plug in once or twice a month is okay. And
Yeah.
so we found that to be a great change from where we were at 2 years ago, and we're really positive about that going forward. Just the feedback that we're getting and the way that it's really supported everyone in our network.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I would say is that when I've been an employer, a business owner for quite a while, um, and I had a very, I would say, my view of how the workday goes
Mm-hmm.
and for people and how they're supposed to work and whatnot hadn't changed much in that time
Yeah.
period. And so this has really made me stop and rethink the 5-day work week,
Yeah.
the office format, how we do meetings and how our conference rooms are set up,
Hmm.
and we've started getting more into the design for people's jobs. I
Yeah.
haven't been there, but we just hired people in positions and promoted them we could. Now we're trying to design career paths for
Hmm.
people,
Interesting.
so that they kind of know what the next step is when they start. So I think I think these are all positive things,
Hmm.
but it's just as we've struggled so much to keep people safe and to think about what they're doing. Um, I think it's really helped me focus quite a bit more on employees and how important our staff is, how important our team members are,
Hmm.
and to try to make it to a better experience for them,
Yeah.
for working in something that I don't want to be the last guy to adopt an important new change, but I also we run a business and we're here for certain things, so trying to balance that out. Um, that thinking, I think, has
Right.
been a pretty major shift.
Hmm. Yeah. We've seen a lot of companies in the bike industry lately shifting more toward that direct relationship with consumers and selling directly on their websites. I mean, even some of the biggest bike brands who have been like the longest holdouts in
Hmm.
that over time are moving to that as people get more comfortable, having things delivered to their homes and, interacting directly with the brand and not the same retailer that they've always gone to. um, and yeah,
I
obviously we're seeing changes in workplaces as well.
I have a good friend of mine has been a long time Amazon leader, and so I've had a lot of glimpses into that business over the years.
Hmm.
And one thing that's been true the whole time is how they've always said specialty retail is specialty retail, and and it will survive. That it's something
Hmm.
that those big folks know they can't really touch, that kind of connection that people make one on one in those shops.
Hmm.
So
Interesting.
I've always, as I've grown my business, I've looked at that as a positive statement for the health of our channel. So even though, yes, people are the number of channels are growing,
Hmm.
and things will change, but
Yeah.
I do think specialty retail is on solid footing.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, we sort of touched on supply chain stuff, and I want to mention that Polar builds products in Colorado using U.S. sourced materials. So I'm curious to find out, like, what are the advantages of doing that? Obviously, there can be some supply chain advantages, and another part is that we think consumers are interested in buying uh, U.S. made products. Do you think that plays a big role? We kind of mentioned the environmental stuff that's like maybe people consider that when they buy a product, maybe they don't. Do you think building products in the U.S. is something that consumers care about, or is there another reason for doing it?
um, it's a good question. I can't say that I've seen over the years that people building in the US are successful and people not building in the US are not successful.
Right.
So it
Good point.
seems to be a factor, but not the driving factor.
Yeah.
And even if you will, I think it's kind of a lower down factor,
Hmm.
for at least for consumers making purchase decisions. So we we try to make sure that people know that it is a purely U.S. source product.
Hmm.
But I've never believed in relying upon that as the sales message.
Hmm.
That really it has to be that the product works for you as a person. That
Yeah.
has to be the number one thing.
Hmm.
Um, for me, I do think there are significant benefits to having a U.S. supply chain, and we try to get those out there. So, as I mentioned, by having this shorter supply chain without having to have because I've dealt with all the difficulties of a 6,000 mile, two different language supply chain for
Hmm.
years. I understand it, and I understood it back when I was at Marin Mountain Bikes on the bike side of things. And so the idea of doing it in the U.S. has been such a nice change. from the ease and really from when we, as opposed to being 6 months from start to finish, now we can talk about 30 days from when we
Oh, wow.
very start the process and bring things together and have the finished product. So that's been a real benefit for us as a company. The way that it plays out for us is benefits the marketplace. So we do try to hold about 100,000 bottles in stock.
Mm.
And we're able to match we do production. We produce about 25,000 bottles a week on a peak week. And we use that to replenish the right products, if you will.
Hmm.
So we can take a
Yeah.
look at, we can offer more colors and more varieties of products and then more easily fill in as those are sold for different, if one goes up in popularity, the other goes down. So we have a little broader product line, I feel. The number of graphics we offer in our insulated products, some of the color options in our single wall bottles, the different tops that we have, our sport kind of classic top and our surge self-sealing valve top, and then some of the dust covers that we offer. We're able to switch up our production very quickly and be able to maintain our stock levels well. And so
Mm.
we did not go out of stock in the last year and a half.
Wow.
That we were able to continue to supply folks once we had that supply built up. The other thing we do with that is we manufacture all of our custom insulated bottles in-house as well. And so we print them, we're able to produce them, and we're able to turn around orders in about 2 weeks.
Mm. Wow.
So we have a very fast supply chain for insulated product. The pricing on it is very competitive, only a little bit more than our inline products. And we've been able to maintain that availability all through this cycle as well
Mm.
because of that inventory. And so those are some real advantages. I think they're primarily supply advantages, like not necessarily
Hmm.
consumer advantages, but they're advantages to the channel for us as a supplier. And so
Mm.
we've tried to emphasize those um, as being the benefits from being crafted in Colorado.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I think we all have gotten an education in how supply chains work and how they're all so interwoven. And, I'm thinking about even when I read that a product is, made in the USA, I'm sure there's some legal definition that says like, as long as 90% is made in the US, then you can say that, or, you know, uh, raw materials count or they don't. I mean, is that
Mm-hmm.
is that the case? Like when you say USA made, that doesn't necessarily mean that like the petroleum was, came from a US like place and it was refined here and then it was like made into pellets and, I mean, there's some point where you're still relying on sources outside the US. Is that true?
Yeah, that's a good question. Made in the USA, from what I understand, is 100%.
Hmm.
But if you're talking about, like you said, the raw pellets prior to a certain step of conversion, I'm not sure how that works, how far back it goes. I know we've had to work pretty hard to keep our manufacturing supply chain all within the US,
Hmm.
including printing our swing tickets, for example, and whatnot, like finding
Oh, wow.
not
Even the
just
packaging.
even the packaging, yeah. So not just the molders and also the printing for our color films, whatnot. So it is a challenge to maintain that made in the USA label.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
a lot of folks have figured out how to say um, assembled in the US from
Right.
US and foreign sources,
Right.
or Apple says designed in California,
Yeah, that's a big
you know,
one. A lot of the bike companies
made,
say that too. Yeah. I've got a
yeah, so
giant
that,
road bike from years ago and it has a huge USA flag on the frame, on the
yeah,
down tube. It's like, but you read the text and it says like designed in USA and then real small it's got like made in Taiwan on it.
right. Yeah, so I think a lot of folks have figured out how to game that a little bit to dilute the message.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
it's um, I guess you have to look into a little bit to know exactly what you're buying.
Mm.
But hopefully, I do think there's a trend that people see the value for some supply chains in making it U.S. sourced or increasing the amount of U.S. sourced. So I think that'll help. I think the pendulum's swinging back a little bit.
Yeah. Good. Good. So you are one of the founding members of the California Outdoor Recreation Partnership. So I'm curious to know, what are some of the things that the partnership is currently advocating for at the state level in California?
So a group of us came together about 4 years ago when there was a movement for outdoor recreation offices to open at the
Hmm.
state level. And it was really this idea that there had been a lot of focus on the national level, on national parks, on national conservation, but there hadn't been the same sort of concerted, uniform effort on the state level.
Hmm.
And so, many of the different states, people said, "Let's make a outdoor recreation office." So I was part of the group that started in California. California, of course, being significant because it's about 13% of our population, and I think the estimates are up to about 20% of the recreational spend happens
Hmm.
in California.
Wow.
Um, Now, California is kind of a zoo. I mean, it's up to 40 million people. So when you go to the Sacramento, the state capital, really the only thing bigger is the federal government.
Hmm.
So it's
Yeah.
hard to kind of drop in and be a part-time participant in the process.
Hmm.
That there's a lot of money there. It's a full-time affair. And even though California has spent billions of dollars over the years on conservation, there hasn't been much of a voice for the outdoor recreation community. And
Hmm.
especially in recent years, there's been a real push towards conservation without keeping in mind recreation use.
Hmm.
So taking land, purchasing it, and putting it aside only for wildlife.
Yeah.
And there were many stories of areas where there were mountain biking trails, sometimes established and recognized, other times just informal. And then they were stopping people from using those areas once they
Hmm.
became wilderness. So
Yeah.
we were by going through conservation, we were actually losing some of our human interaction with our outdoor
Hmm.
spaces. And to
Yeah.
me, it's that human interaction that we develop a value for the outdoor, and therefore that we want to keep the outdoor and keep
Yeah.
it looking like the outdoors. So that was part of our message, that we wanted to have a voice for outdoor recreation. So we're representing um, brands, specialty retailers, and service providers here in the
Hmm.
state. So a lot of the brands nationally are very interested in California, so they're participating, and then we're building a base now of retailers, service providers being people like independent sales reps and some guide services and whatnot. And we've made some good inroads in talking to the administration and working with legislatures. Um, our two real priorities. The first is to maximize the amount of spending on outdoor recreation infrastructure in the state.
Hmm.
So parks, trails, trailheads,
Hmm.
things that provide access for people. Increased dirt trails, for example, big push. And we've seen a great victory this year. There's been over $1 billion budget
Oh,
in
wow.
the California state budget that's just for outdoor recreation, both on the infrastructure improvement and on programs.
Hmm.
So that's a significant increase in what it's been in the past. So we're out there advocating to make sure, if you will, that outdoor recreation continues to get a good slice of the pie and continues to
Hmm.
have a real vibrant infrastructure here in the state, because we've got a huge population. The second thing is we're trying to increase the number of people recreating outdoors each year. If you look at the participation rate in our state, we're actually the lowest in outdoor participation of all the Western states.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, which is a little surprising, you think, because California used to be the epicenter of things. I think that's changed a bit in the last 20 years. I mean, from
Hmm.
the outdoor and recreation side. Uh, but the biggest issue is that we have communities within the state, certain populations that don't recreate at the same rate as others.
Hmm.
And so our African American population, our Asian population, our Hispanic population don't go out and bike and hike and run at the same rate
Hmm.
as the rest of the population.
Hmm.
And so there's a whole equitable access component to this,
Yeah.
of just education and access for these communities based upon where they live, and what kind of resources they have. And so we've been working with the state to try to address equitable access, you name it, programs to take kids fourth grade out to the national parks, expose them to the outdoors,
Mm-hmm.
publishing the park materials in different languages, everything we can to help increase that access component and
Mm.
ultimately increase the number of people recreating outdoors. And that's for us as an industry, yes, we want to see more people participating because that helps drive the industry, but it's also addresses that question of equity and fairness, which I think everybody likes to see addressed as well.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because, I mean, those are obviously two big issues nationally as well. And, California does tend to, I mean, it's like you said, it's the biggest economy, um, biggest state by population as well. And so as
Yep.
California
Yeah.
goes, oftentimes the rest of the country goes. So that's great to see that increasing access and making sure there are more trails, because I think no matter where we are, especially as mountain bikers, we always want more trails, and the pandemic has just sort of amplified that need and made it more obvious that people
Yeah.
enjoy that, and we need more places to recreate.
Well, there's a good, I'll give a shout out to Cal MTV, who's a very well organized and active organization. They came out with their members last year and helped us to talk to lawmakers
Mm-hmm.
and to help to make the case and really good advocates for local trail building and expanding local trail building. And they were able to talk to their local politicians about it. So I think that was exactly what our causes need to do, kind of come
Yeah.
together both as the industry and as the recreationists and make sure that people understand what we want and that it's not bad and that we can work together to make it happen.
Yeah, yeah. And it's, you mentioned the industry, the outdoor industry is obviously a big employer and, part of the economy, but tourism, outdoor related tourism, I'm sure is as big or bigger. And it's not just,
Mm,
I mean, a lot of the things that we do are free. We can go visit parks and things, but then there's all the things around that in terms of like you're eating in restaurants and you're staying in hotels and all kinds of other things that ripple across the economy. And it's great to see more recognition of that and sort of the value that recreation brings.
absolutely. California's had one of the biggest advertising programs on that front for years. So I
Mm-hmm.
think, and has been kind of the vanguard. But it's great to see places like Bentonville,
Mm.
who are really raising their profile now and seeing the benefits from that and how it can help turn around the whole community just by
Yeah.
really embracing outdoor recreation. And you see that a lot in places like Utah, Colorado, Oregon, Vermont, New Hampshire that are really embracing outdoor recreation as an economy now.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of competition for our tire tracks and our boot marks. So I read that you're also a registered investment advisor, and it seems you've done pretty well with Hydrapak. I'm curious to know, in your opinion, is the bike industry a good place for individuals to invest their savings and for retirement? I remember looking years ago, probably at least 20 years ago, for bike companies, like publicly traded bike companies, and they were all penny stocks. So it's like bike, is this like a good business for us to be in? Like, is this a place people can get rich or build wealth, or what's your take on sort of investing in the bike industry?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, I started off out of college doing some banking, and so that's how I got
Mm-hmm.
a registered investment advisor, and then I've maintained it just to help my family and friends.
Yeah.
So I can't say I'm an active investment advisor
Right.
from
We're
that
not
sense,
right. This is not, you're not giving investment advice. We're not.
I'm not giving investment advice.
Yes.
Um, but I'll tell you, I mean, personally, I am more heavily invested in the outdoor and bike industry than anything else because the
Mm-hmm.
majority of my wealth creation and wealth is tied up in my company. And my
Right.
company is 100% dedicated to this marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's true for the majority of the people who are involved in this marketplace. They're not necessarily involved just as shareholders of corporations, but there are more people who have started businesses, whether it's retailers or brands or you name it, that and so it's more private ownerships.
Hmm.
And I see a lot of, I mentioned earlier, specialty retail has a great place
Hmm.
as far as connections one-on-one. So I think for people who are invested and successful in it, I do think there's a future. For people who are brands and equipment, um, when we get something like recently the 20% increase in participation or whatever the number is you want to look at,
Hmm.
that's happened during COVID, that's just a great sign. When
Yeah.
there's more people here, when we get more exposure, that's the right place to be. So the numbers were a little challenging coming up into COVID, but this has been a great bump.
Mm.
And so I think, there have been many people who've been successful in this area. Maybe not, in the billions, but certainly
Right.
lots of millionaires. And so, um, I think there's a lot of people happy with their experience here. So I look at it and say it's a good industry. It's an industry that's a bit self-made from that standpoint.
Mm.
Either you do it yourself or you don't.
Right.
And I know there's a lot of places that aren't successful as well. So
Yeah.
it's not the easiest place. I have found it kind of, we've relied for a number of years on the outsourcing of products to cheaper and cheaper locations to
Hmm.
keep our price points um, low. Obviously with most bikes coming out of China as of a couple of years ago, and now we're seeing a little bit of the drawback of that,
Hmm.
which is yes, we've kept them low, but we haven't really maintained a robust base for manufactured and supply. And so now that we're trying to address that, we're seeing the prices going back up.
Yeah.
Uh, and that'll be good because that'll mean we could produce the products competitively in more different places and probably broaden that supply base again. But it does mean we'll have to make sure that we're not just filling garages with gear that people only use once a year. We'll have to, make sure that we get people out more often and they could get more value out of the product. So
Yeah.
I'm bullish on the industries. I personally have been satisfied. Um, again, investing the majority of my wealth here. Um,
Yeah.
but as far as stocks, I don't follow them very closely for the
Yeah.
industry. Just the things I read in the industry papers in the morning about who's buying whom and whatnot.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, it is interesting that, like you said, there's a lot of like privately held companies and things, and a lot of these brands are self-made. These are passion projects. These are people who, they just love the outdoors. They love biking, and so they want to create a product or be a part of that industry. And I always joke with people too. We all of us love to complain about how expensive bikes are, and these bike brands, they must be just making so much money because they're selling these $10,000 bikes. But like you said, I don't know that there are any bike billionaires, right? I mean, this isn't like tech
Right.
or finance. I mean, maybe Mike Sinyard at Specialized, maybe he's probably worth at least $1 billion. But other than that, like, yeah, nobody seems to be getting like ridiculously rich. And everybody I've spoken with and met over the years, yeah, I mean, they're a part of this industry because they love it, not because they're trying to get rich or anything. And so I think that's one of the things that makes the industry unique.
Yeah, absolutely. Even to the point where people will do the jobs for less.
Yeah.
And so with the wages staying somewhat uh, depressed, and that's always a little challenging when you compare working in our industry to other industries where
Right.
people aren't doing it just for the cultural experience or the exposure.
Right.
Is that it's that the wages can be a little lower, and that's always a challenge.
Yeah.
So, but a passion project is a good term for it.
Right. Absolutely. Well, finally, I want to ask you, um, how much product and design and development you're able to do these days. Obviously you're trying to run a company, but you do have that background. And so, as someone who has studied mechanical engineering, what frustrates you about the biking experience today? Do you see any sort of opportunities that, yeah, maybe people aren't looking at that you think they should?
Hmm. Um, So I still am involved in product design. I would say it's a little higher level.
Hmm.
Um, if you go back 10 years ago, I was on all of the patent applications and very
Oh,
actively
cool.
hands-on. That's not really the case today. I've got a great team of engineers who are not only great designers, but I'll shout out to John Austin on my staff, who's really been the head in our sustainability efforts.
Mm-hmm.
So it's great to see folks who thinking both about product design and other elements as well.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that is something for the future. I'm a little bit more I guess I use the word visionary, someone keeping us on track and making sure that we're focused on what we need to be focused on. And
Yeah.
from that standpoint, I'm a little bit like the lead customer in there in the product design group and trying to talk about what we want to have and what we don't have.
Yeah.
So um, I do miss it sometimes, but you know, it's important as you go through that your positions evolve over time, that you have a new job every 5 or 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
Even if, I haven't been able to switch companies, but it's always good to have a new job and a new focus just to keep yourself fresh.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for again, I'm a bit more focused on the road side of things than the mountain side. Um, I was immensely relieved when disc brakes came on the scene
Yeah.
because
That's a mountain biking
I
thing. See, I think you are a mountain biker. You just
oh
ride road
it's
bikes.
it's a I've had discs on my mountain bikes for a long time,
Hmm.
and so but I've got about a 200-pound frame, so I'm no goat. I'm not I'm coming down those hills faster than I'm going up them,
Yeah.
and so just from a safety standpoint, I was on a century ride a few years back where somebody went down and we've got these crazy hills out here in California. Went down a little too fast and flew off the edge and died.
Oh, wow.
Um, and it's serious issues with safety. And so I was really happy to see um, disc brakes come in and just the element of safety that's been involved there. So that's a great technology again that came from mountain. They brought it over to road.
Hmm.
It's improved the products to me substantially, and they've been able to get the price points to a reasonable level with it. So I was happy to see that. I'm still, I've I was about to try my first electronic shifting and some of these new things coming out before COVID hit, and then when COVID hit and all the bikes became in such short supply, I
Right.
said I'll just wait a little bit until let all the consumers buy the bikes. I'm fine
Yeah.
with the one I've got
Won't be the
for a
early
while.
adopter on that one.
Yeah, so looking forward to trying out some of that. I do think there's opportunities for drivetrain improvement over time. We still have, if you look at the when the current drivetrain system evolved, it's been around for quite a while.
Right.
And to me, there could be some interesting developments on that come over time that make it a bit more reliable, a little better experience.
Yeah.
So I don't have anything specific, but I'm certainly happy to adopt the new stuff as they come along.
Yeah. Well, that's a great attitude to have for sure. Well, Matt, thanks so much for joining us and talking to us about Hydrapak and all the things that you're doing in the industry. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Jeff, thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Well, you can find out more about Hydrapak and some of the products we talked about at hydrapak.com. That's all we've got this week. We'll talk to you again next week.